A man in Austin sold his fully paid-off house last year, moved into a rental apartment, and put the entire proceeds into an index fund. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. His own mother called him reckless. And yet, 18 months later, he was sitting on more liquid wealth, more monthly cash flow, and less stress than he'd had in a decade of home ownership. My name is Daniel, and I want to talk about why a decision that sounds financially insane on the surface was actually one of the smartest moves this guy ever made, and what that says about a handful of money beliefs that almost everyone in this country treats as gospel, even though the math quietly disagrees. Here's the thing about financial myths. They don't survive because they're stupid. They survive because they feel morally correct. Somewhere along the way, personal finance stopped being a math problem and became a character test. And once that happened, the beliefs that made you feel disciplined, cautious, or virtuous started winning out over the beliefs that actually made you money. That's the thread I want to pull on today, because once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. Let's start with the one that guy in Austin blew up. The idea that owning your home outright, no mortgage, no debt, nothing hanging over your head, is the ultimate symbol of financial safety. And look, emotionally, I get it completely. There's something primal about knowing nobody can take the roof over your head. But here's what almost nobody calculates. That home, sitting there, paid off, isn't doing anything for you. It's not generating income, it's not growing in a way you can access without selling or borrowing against it. Meanwhile, every dollar of equity trapped inside those walls is a dollar that isn't compounding in the market. If that Austin house was worth around $480,000 and the historical return on a diversified stock portfolio averages somewhere around 8 to 9% a year over long stretches, that trapped equity was quietly costing him tens of thousands of dollars annually in opportunity cost, just sitting there, silent, feeling safe. Paying rent and investing the difference isn't throwing money away. It's choosing which asset holds your wealth. And sometimes bricks are the worst possible answer to that question. This is where it gets strange, because right next to that belief sits its evil twin, the myth that carrying any debt at all makes you financially reckless. I know people, smart people, engineers, teachers, small business owners who have 6 figures sitting in a savings account earning basically nothing while they still owe money on a car loan at 4% interest that they could pay off tomorrow. They keep the cash sitting there because debt feels dangerous and cash feels safe. But sitting on that pile of cash while inflation runs somewhere around 3% a year means that money is losing real value every single month it just sits there. The debt isn't actually the threat. The inertia is. Not all debt behaves the same way, and lumping a 4% car loan in with a 24% credit card balance is like being equally afraid of a butter knife and a chainsaw because they're both technically sharp. Think about that for a second, because it connects to something even bigger. We've been trained to treat every financial decision as either good or bad, safe or risky, responsible or irresponsible, when in reality, almost nothing in personal finance is that simple. Take the belief that saving aggressively in your 20s is the secret to getting rich, the earlier better, sacrifice now, thank yourself later. It sounds airtight because compounding is real, but here's what that belief conveniently ignores. A 24-year-old making $51,000 a year in Columbus, Ohio, squeezing every spare dollar into a brokerage account while eating rice and beans for 3 years straight isn't just saving money. She's also giving up experiences, relationships, and opportunities that only exist when you're young, broke, and flexible. Meanwhile, that same $51,000 will likely be closer to $90,000 by her mid-30s as her career matures. So the question becomes, why is the version of her with the least money making all the sacrifices, while the future version with nearly double the income gets to relax? This is what economists call consumption smoothing, the idea that your saving rate should roughly track your income curve instead of front-loading all the pain into the years you can least afford it. Now here's a question I actually want you to sit with for a second, and I genuinely love to see your answer in the comments below. Which financial rule did you absorb as a kid, from a parent or a grandparent, that you've never actually questioned even once as an adult? Because I think you'll be surprised how many of your current money habits trace back to something someone told you before you turned 15, back when you had zero ability to evaluate whether it was actually true. There's another myth I want to get into, and it's one that quietly wrecks people during their most vulnerable financial years, which is the belief that moving your money into cash or bonds as you approach retirement is the responsible, grown-up thing to do. It feels safe because the account stops swinging around every time the market has a bad week. But safety measured in stability is not the same thing as safety measured in outcomes. A retired couple with $1 million sitting mostly in cash and bonds is exposed to a much quieter danger, the danger of simply running out of purchasing power over a 25 or 30-year retirement, because that money isn't growing fast enough to outpace both inflation and their own withdrawals. Meanwhile, a portfolio that stays meaningfully invested in stocks, even into retirement, tends to preserve wealth and income far more reliably over those same decades. Historical research on this is honestly pretty stark. The volatility feels scarier day to day, but the slow bleed of cash sitting still is the thing that actually empties the account. I want to pause here because if this way of thinking about money is resonating with you, hit subscribe, because this channel exists specifically to dig into the gap between what feels financially responsible and what the actual numbers tell us, and that gap is bigger and stranger than most people realize. Let's talk about one more because it might be the sneakiest of them all. The belief that if a piece of financial advice comes from someone hugely successful, it must apply to you. Everyone loves quoting a legendary investor's old wisdom about picking individual stocks, conveniently forgetting that for the last couple of decades of his career, even he couldn't consistently beat a simple, low-cost index fund. And that's coming from someone with a research team, decades of experience, and access most of us will never have. If the person with every possible advantage in the game increasingly leaned on simple, diversified investing rather than stock picking, what exactly makes the average person watching a video on their lunch break think they're the exception? This isn't really about investing skill, it's about ego, about wanting to believe we're clever enough to beat a system that has quietly humbled almost everyone who's tried. Here's what I keep coming back to with all of this. Every one of these myths, the paid-off house, the fear of all debt, the aggressive early saving, the cash cushion in retirement, the stock-picking dream, they all share the same emotional core. They let you feel like a responsible, careful person without requiring you to actually look at the math. And that feeling is comfortable. It's comfortable enough that people will defend it, even when it's quietly costing them tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. The uncomfortable truth is that real financial responsibility sometimes looks like selling the house, sometimes looks like keeping the car loan, and sometimes looks like staying invested while your stomach is in knots. It rarely looks like whatever made you feel safest as a kid. If any of this shifted how you think about your own money habits, go ahead and subscribe, because we're going to keep pulling these threads apart, one myth at a time. But before you go, I want to leave you with this. If you found out tomorrow that one of your core money beliefs, the one you'd defend the hardest, was actually costing you money instead of protecting you, would you even want to know?